Okay, I think we're live. Sorry, minor technical difficulties. I think I forgot how to do this thing because it's been about a month or so. But excited to do this. A lot to talk about, and I'll throw something on Twitter. Hopefully, get some questions coming in, and we can get rolling. Any questions you got? Harbaugh related, football team related, basketball, anything else? Fire away, and I'll let you all steer the conversation. Wait a couple minutes for some stuff to hopefully come rolling in. Our defensive coordinator had a very good day. Yeah, Jeff Fenner. I think a lot of people watched the Baltimore game with a lot of interested eyes and ears because I don't think a lot of people knew a lot about Mike Macdonald before Friday, and anyone saying they did is either a diehard or just probably lying, but or a Baltimore fan. But still pretty surprised by that report on Friday. It seemed like Michigan was going in a different direction in terms of having someone with head coaching experience, previous coordinator experience, but first look at Macdonald in real time now that he's sort of that curtain's sort of been pulled back on his candidacy is got to feel pretty good about how Baltimore looked, which shouldn't surprise me. I haven't said the Macdonald. I say higher because it's still reportedly. I caution calling it good or bad because don't really know what to say about it. But I think it's fair to say that it was surprising. But if Jim Harbaugh in a restructured contract where it's based on him betting on himself and making it very incentive laden to where you need to be successful to get paid and rehabilitate your image. If he's going to hand the keys to the defense over to someone that's relatively unproven, it's going to be someone that he really believes in. And so the people that are underwhelmed by the Macdonald stuff, hopefully today ease their fears a little bit. But I mean, John Harbaugh must have absolutely vouched for him. Jim must know a lot about him too. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, but whatever you read about him is pretty promising. And today was a good sign too. So I know a lot of people were at least taken aback on Friday. Some were angry. Some people always want to be angry and are just looking for an excuse to be angry, though. But hopefully today was a little improvement on how they feel about where that is reportedly headed. How about them Browns? Yeah, well, I'm not happy for the people that slash themselves as Browns / Ohio State fans, but everyone else, the Browns are an easy team to root for outside of the Ohio thing, and obviously there's some Michigan blood there too. But as a lot of us, I assume, are Lions fans can attest to a long struggling fan base looking for some good news and some wins. And if the Browns are getting it, maybe it's the Lions' turn. So pretty crazy start to that game for sure. You were jokingly cheering for Tennessee today, but it helps Baltimore to win. Am I right? Yeah, yeah, I said go Titans. Jokingly because I mean the earlier you can get if Macdonald's going to be the guy, the earlier you can get him in the building, the better. Get him making a board on defensive targets, start talking with assistants, making decisions on who that staff will be. The earlier he's in Ann Arbor, the earlier you can get rolling on that. So selfishly, I'd like him in the building, but I think there's a lot to be gained. There can be positive momentum if Baltimore makes a big run and has good showings on defense like they did today. I mean, Derrick Henry doesn't get stopped like that very often. So selfishly, it would have been great to have him announced as the coach on Monday and Schembechler shortly after. But if the reason he's not going to be introduced is because his defense is helping push Baltimore further down the playoffs, and it's helping his profile, maybe that could be a good recruiting help people believe in him in-house as well. Way too early, but who's your prediction for starting QB next season? I'd say Cade McNamara right now, but who knows? Like you said, way too early. Don't even know who's going to be running that offense necessarily, or calling the plays on offense. I think you're going to be losing some people in the portal, potentially gaining some people in the portal. So could be very different 9 months from now. But if I had a gun to my head right now, I would politely ask the person to remove the gun from my head. But then I would, my guess would be Cade McNamara. Do you think we landed him due to Jim Trecht hurting our pursuit of an established coordinator? I don't. I have on pretty good authority that there were some pretty qualified, normal candidates that were interviewing for the job, and that showed legitimate interest, and not just from getting a competing offer, leveraging an offer, and getting your price higher. The coordinator lists I had made in my wish list was partially based on criteria, but also partially based on things I had heard in terms of people that were interested in Michigan and vice versa. So I'm surprised it took that pivot. But I do not look at Macdonald as a consolation prize or a sign that Michigan whiffed on a bunch of people, because I really don't think that's the case. In your view, how much should success of U of M players in the NFL determine the success of our program? I find it frustrating that many of our players only reach their potential after they get to the NFL. You can look at it both ways, because I think a lot of people think Jim Harbaugh's time in Ann Arbor has been disappointing. Well, I think a lot of people feel that. But taking 2020 outside, or taking that out of the equation, his first 5 years on campus, Michigan was top 5 in terms of putting people in the draft. So most people would, well, any reasonable person would say that Michigan wasn't a top 5 college program at that time. But I think they were turning out people to the NFL at sort of a disproportionate level, if you look at it that way. So, well, you see someone like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a day 3 pick, but making plays in the NFL, and you see Michael Onwenu, Mo Hurst, all these people that have, well, actually Hurst isn't a good example because he was great in college, but you see people who make that next step in the pros that weren't doing it necessarily at that level in college. And I know that frustrates fans, but you do have that other side of the coin too, where technically, from a talent standpoint, Michigan is putting more people in the NFL than the talent, quote unquote, they have at the college level. So it's complete human nature to feel disappointed or feel bittersweet about seeing a Michigan guy succeed at a higher level in the pros than he did at colleges. And I think some of it is absolutely a case of them not being used at their highest potential in college, many of which is Michigan skill position guys. But there are two sides to that coin. So understand the frustration, but I don't think it's as bad as the narrative sort of says. Am I an a-hole for thinking Ward has crippled us by how this was handled with Jim? I hate to say two sides of the coin for this question, just like the previous one, but I think anyone that looks at this and saying the reason it went poorly was because of Ward Manuel, or the reason it went poorly is because of Jim Harbaugh, I think both of them are off the mark, because I think both sides are responsible in part for how it played out the way it did. The end product, you have to feel pretty good about Ward Manuel. I think Ward Manuel negotiated a better end contract than Jim Harbaugh, and the ball was in Harbaugh's court at a somewhat early stage. So to say that it was drawn out because of Ward, I think, is a little unfair too. Could Manuel, if his number one goal was getting this done quickly, could Manuel have done something to make this get done quickly? Yes. But I don't think Michigan would have ended up having as favorable of a situation with the end contract. So Michigan extended Harbaugh, and I know that makes some people upset. But at the same time, I think what was negotiated into the contract in terms of buyouts on both sides leaves a lot of flexibility that even the people that were in the Matt Campbell camp or just in the not Jim Harbaugh camp, it is going to be a lot easier to make a move to move on from Harbaugh, or for Harbaugh to move on from Michigan next season, where it won't be as financially punitive as it would have been this year, or typically when a contract is just extended. Because the one thing about signing a contract extension is usually that means, okay, you're extended, there's going to be a big buyout that's going to sort of make this marriage a long-term thing. And this contract extension was very unique in the sense of it not only didn't do that, it did the opposite of that. And it's technically easier for both sides to move on from each other now. Who will coach secondary this year for Michigan? I think there's a lot of Tim Banks smoke in terms of being a co-defensive coordinator, and I think he would at least take on the safeties. Mike Zordich is one of the 2 or 3 coaches whose future is a little bit up in the air. And I personally am a big Zordich guy. I know some people who put a lot of stock in recruiting aren't as in love with him, but I don't think he's a complete liability on the recruiting trail, but I also think he is, from a teaching and a technical standpoint, he's probably number 1 or number 2 on the staff in terms of developing players, with Ed Warner probably being his only competition. So I'd love to see him back coaching the cornerbacks. I think cornerbacks are one of the few positions this year where you saw notable improvement over the course of the year. Part of that was because the bar was set so low with a really disappointing first couple of weeks. But corners in general have been a strong point of the Harbaugh era. And especially if you're going to bring in a couple, or at least one really highly touted corner in this next class, ideally. I think the combination of having that talent and having a good coach to coach it would be good. So right now, if I had to guess, I would say Zordich on corners and Banks safeties. But depending on what happens with the defensive coordinator job, and if it's a co-coordinator and who that coordinator may be, and if that coordinator has a background with secondaries, if that coordinator has someone that he prefers to work with, that could change. But if I had to give 2 names right now, those would be the 2 I would give. Where does Matt Campbell end up right now? I think Matt Campbell's in a really good spot right now, because it's looking like he's going to stay in Iowa State for another year. And while this looked like a good year for him to sort of move on and sell high, because it's not every year Iowa State's going to be playing in the Big 12 championship and being a top 5 team. Iowa State's going to be a really good team next year. I was actually just working on my way too early 2021 poll for the morning news for my day job, and I have Iowa State number 5. Brock Purdy's coming back. Charlie Kohler, just their stud tight end, just said he's coming back. Breece Hall, their Doak Walker finalist running back, is only a true sophomore, so he'll be back next year. They're going to have, I think it's like 20 of their 22, 23 starters last year. And yeah, Oklahoma's going to be a good team again next year in the Big 12 next year. So I think Matt Campbell's star in the coaching thing is only going to be coming up. And so taking 1 more year, staying in Iowa State, and maybe waiting things out and seeing what other opportunities there may be. I'm not trying to sound like a jilted lover holding onto hope for Campbell to Michigan, but with what I've been saying about that contract and how easy it is for one side to move away from the other, I don't think you're going to stop seeing connections for Campbell to Michigan if things start going off the rails next year, or if Jim Harbaugh plays well or coaches well enough to maybe get some interest in NFL circles. But also, speaking of NFL, I would not rule out the NFL and Matt Campbell either. It's really up to him, because I think he's going to have choices on both sides. He was just connected to the Jets again this weekend, and it sounds like he said thanks but no thanks. But he's a great coach. He's won 3 out of 4 Big 12 Coaches of the Year in that conference. The only year he did it was the year Matt Rule took Baylor from the bottom floor of FBS into the Big 12 championship game and parlayed it into an NFL job. So the Big 12 has some very good coaches, and the fact that he's consistently regarded as the best of the bunch says everything you need to say about that guy. So I think he's in Iowa State next year, but he has too much potential, and Iowa State, I think next year is their plateau. I think that's where their most elite talent's going to be. Purdy will be gone after that year. Breece Hall's probably going to go pro. So I think that's the year he probably cashes in his chips. Is it 100% Macdonald at DC? How does a program like U of M go with an unproven defensive coordinator? What I know is what's being reported. I don't know better than the NFL types that are saying it, but when you have Schefter, Rappaport, and the other big NFL names all saying that it's happening when their season's done, I have no reason to believe any differently. And I think unless something crazy happens, that will be the case. I expect it to be a co-defensive coordinator situation, just because he doesn't have that coordinator experience, also doesn't have that experience hitting the road recruiting and stuff. So if you're going to pair him up with someone, I think I just said this in a previous question, but Tim Biggs would be my first guess. He's the co-defensive coordinator at Penn State right now, regarded as a really strong recruiter, has been one of the reasons Penn State has that pipeline into Michigan. And he also coaches secondary with Macdonald's current background more at linebacker. So there's a little bit of diversity and difference in terms of positions that are being emphasized. So that's my guess at defensive coordinator. In terms of how does a program like Michigan go with someone like that? Like I said, I'm surprised. I didn't think they would go this route. That's not the route I would have gone. But if you extend a coach and tell him he's in charge of a program and this is the route he wants to go, so be it. I'm not smarter than the people in the room that are making the decision. So I'm not going to sit here and tell them they're an idiot. I think anyone that has worked with Macdonald or covered him or knows of him has lots of great things to say about him. But I also think it's a big leap of faith to hand over a defense to someone that's never coordinated. So I'll be looking on with the same curiosity and questioning, see how it goes as everyone else. But yes, I was surprised to see a program like Michigan go that route. What's the word on Austin Davison's return? Hey, a basketball question. I don't know if people know this. Michigan has an undefeated basketball team that is currently leading the Big Ten. So I want this to go whatever direction it is, but it is interesting to see that football continues to drive the needle with how things are going with Michigan basketball. Maybe that changes in the next couple of months, though. So question, what's the word on Austin Davis and his return? If healthy, can he help against Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Rutgers? Yes. You can never have too much depth in the Big Ten. Obviously, Hunter Dickinson has been the most pleasant surprise. Yes, he was a highly touted recruit, but I don't think anyone in their wildest dreams could have expected he'd be a top 5 player or top 5 candidate for KenPom National Player of the Year. That being said, he's gonna probably hit a freshman wall at some point. Someone that's playing his type of minutes in the position he plays, you could get banged up, you can get in foul trouble, and as well as Brandon Johns has done off the bench as a spark and kind of an energy guy. He's not your prototypical center, and when you play a lot of those teams that the person that just asked the question said, where you have those bigger guys, you're going to need that big body. And Austin Davis is a big body, and he's an experienced, pretty cerebral player. So it sounds like he's working back for his return. Don't have a return date for it, but when he comes back, I think it's going to be very welcome for sure. Is there any concern with Xavier Worthy not enrolling early? Yeah, that's the big chatter this weekend on the premium sites. I don't know anything beyond what people at the Wolverine and 247 Sports are reporting. Sounds like there's a hiccup in potentially getting early. Hopefully there's a resolution in that this week. If not, he either waits it out and joins Michigan in the summer, or if he is set on enrolling early, he plays for somewhere that's not Michigan, and that would really suck. Michigan's class has a lot of really good wide receivers, but Worthy is kind of at a class of his own. I actually think he's, in terms of some people I've spoken to, some film and everything, he's very highly rated, but I actually think he's a little underrated in terms of the impact someone he could make, and someone like him could make. Michigan kind of just getting in its own way and preventing something from happening that doesn't necessarily need to be prevented. But I don't want to speak too much on the situation without really being an authority on it. So selfishly, hope it gets worked out. I am not looking forward to I would not be looking forward to seeing what I'll be doing on Monday, and that's watching someone like Najee Harris playing a national championship game. That hurts, and if Worthy is going to be the wide receiver version of that, that would not be very fun. So Jeff says, in your article you mentioned Jim needing to be back to being himself. Does him taking a 50% pay cut as such a competitive guy worrying you, or glass half full, he needs to hit those incentives? People I've spoken to say this has really sort of reinvigorated him, or he's sort of using it as like a challenge, a bet, a bet on himself. He's using it almost as a motivation tactic. So if this is what it takes for him to motivate himself, not the way I would do it, but it could end up being a positive. So in terms of Harbaugh getting back to being Harbaugh, that would be a very exactly an example of something I was citing. So yeah, not how I'd do it, but God bless the man. How likely is a co-coordinator? If you're talking about defense, I think it's very likely. I would actually be quite surprised if that's not how Michigan goes, especially with multiple spots on that defense opening up. In terms of offense, we'll see. I think Josh Gaddis will be back. There has been Joe Moorhead chatter. It seems like that chatter has died down a little bit. But if someone like Moorhead were to come in, that could be a co-coordinator situation, just because he has worked with Gaddis before, and it seems like something that the two would potentially be okay with. But outside of that, I think offense is probably less than a 50% chance at this point, but defense, I'd say north of 90. I'm fully expecting that to be a co-coordinator situation. One thing you mentioned as an aside when talking about Matt Campbell coming to Michigan is that there can be transition costs. So good news now is no transition costs. Yeah. Anytime you have a coaching change, whether it's in a recruiting class or people who are at Michigan who weren't recruited by the incoming staff wanting to go elsewhere or follow that staff elsewhere, you're going to get a lot of that. So by keeping the same coaching staff, you are avoiding that. This year, a little unique in that there's the unpunished transfer. So if Matt Campbell were coming here, I could have seen a scenario where some Iowa State people might have followed him, but that is a moot point, sunk cost now. So not there. So yes, no transition costs, but this actually would have been a weird year where bringing in a new coach might have actually brought some positives with it. I'm going to take a quick drink. My throat is getting dry. Well, while we take a quick break, if you are if you're in here, you're not subscribed. If you subscribe to my channel, it's a huge help in terms of the overall health of the channel, also the visibility of the posts. Also, if you can quick throw a like on the actual chat, that also helps with the visibility of stuff. I enjoy doing these, but I want to do them if it's going to get people to come in. More people can come across this, the better. So any help on that front is huge. Adam asks, any word on Joe Moorhead? Kind of already talked about that. Nothing really new. The chatter, again, people from Rivals were saying it was people from Rivals were sort of in that camp. People from 247 were always saying it wasn't a thing. So there's that disconnect already. But I think if it was happening, it might have already happened. So I think the likelihood of that is dwindling. But as I've written multiple times, I think that would be a very, very good fit here. So if there's savings from Jim Harbaugh having a much smaller contract, hopefully some of that can be pushed to an assistant pool staff, and you can get a big fish like Moorhead. But we're still kind of in wait and see mode there. How's it playing with no fans? It sucks. And what's interesting, something I wasn't really even thinking about, but in talking to a couple of sources after the Harbaugh thing came official on Friday, is that a big reason why the contract was so low and what that offer from Michigan was is they're trying to the expectation is it's not going to be a full big house next year, and we might even be looking at half capacity, which is pretty insane to me. That actually caught me off guard, and I heard that from someone that pretty reliable. So might want to get used to the well, not necessarily no fans, but limited fans. I was selfishly, maybe just because I'm sick of living in this COVID world, but was kind of hoping we'd be a lot closer to normal if we're looking 9 more months down the line, but that might not be the case. So Michigan Stadium always is a little overrated in terms of how good of a home field advantage it is, but if you're still looking at Michigan and the rest of the Big Ten as a baseline, if you're playing in front of 110,000 people, that's a big advantage, and not having that is a bummer. So I guess it's kind of wait and see mode on that. Seriously though, maybe keeping Harbaugh is better route right now, especially with incoming recruiting class. Yeah, I've kind of said all along that you don't make a coaching decision based on one recruit or even one recruiting class. But that's absolutely a check mark in Harbaugh's favor for when you were sort of weighing the pros cons of what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, or whatever. So I endure, but I'm surprised by how many people are still so negative against Harbaugh after Friday played out, because even the people that are anti-Harbaugh got some pretty good news on Friday because of the way that contract is structured. So I'm fine with how this played out. Honestly, I'm just kind of relieved there was a resolution one way or the other. I've been open about what my preference was, and it didn't play out exactly how I wanted it to. But at the same time, like, what are you going to gain by sitting here and complaining about it for months on end this off season? It is what it is. There's a resolution now, and you're going to get a new staff in there, and hopefully you can start building toward getting this thing back to where it should be. Does the transfer portal open up for M now that Harbaugh is extended? Yeah, I think that's the maybe the biggest immediate need to sort of on and do something about. And it's probably the area where Michigan hamstrung itself the most by stretching this out. In the immediate aftermath of the season, the biggest concern was signing day, because you're looking at mid-December, and it was insane not to have the coaching situation handled there. But once you got past signing day relatively unscathed, which is still very fortunate, and I think Michigan's very lucky that it played out that way, the next thing shifted to the transfer portal, and You look at programs in state. You look at what Michigan State's doing. Mel Tucker brought in a quarterback, brought in a running back, brought in some other people, and really used that portal to his advantage. And there are of other peer programs doing the same, and Michigan just hasn't been able to do that because their entire staff. There are some people that are already gone. There are some people that are up in flux that are worrying about things other than the transfer portal right now, and whether you'll ever get full admission on that or not. Jim Harbaugh's focus wasn't on the transfer portal the last couple of weeks either. It's his future. It's what the staff's going to be, and things like that. So you got to grind in the portal. You're already sort of you can still escape and shore up your defensive line, bring in a linebacker or two, and hopefully another guy or two that can help out, because there are some holes on this roster, and there are things that need a quick fix, and that's your best way of doing it. When Michigan loses this year, will you take another self-serving leave from Twitter? Great question. Bobby Higginson. You'll know him from someone that shows up in my mentions every single time I tweet. So that seems like a very fulfilling life to be living. Are you ever going to find out what really happened with McCaffrey? I'm not getting into the whole rumored McCaffrey was in the lead, sat out because he got sick, and he was punished for that. Like that was a big rumor this offseason. I've heard from people that say that absolutely happened. I hear from people say that absolutely didn't happen. And there seems to be so much more of that he said, she said stuff going around in this program. So I try not to treat rumor as fact and do too much with that. But the fact of the matter is, he hasn't landed anywhere else, but I don't think of that as an opening or an opportunity for Michigan. It sounds like that ship has very much sailed, and it's kind of a bummer because I think he still has the potential of being a special quarterback, and hope he lands somewhere where his skill set can be utilized adequately, because I still think Michigan probably made the right decision with Milton going into this year in terms of the offense it's running, but it was obviously a disaster of a year for basically everyone involved. Any thoughts on hockey this weekend? Weird weekend versus Sparta. Yeah, that's insane that you look at a 9-0 game on Friday. It's like, okay, all this junior stuff and these breaks are off. Michigan's kind of back, and this is what this team's going to be like. And then the next night you go and you lose a 3-2 heartbreaker. So this team is very, very, very talented, probably one of the three most talented teams in the country, but it's also inexperienced, and you can't really afford to just have some cheap losses that they've had this year, and hopefully that slows down and stops altogether with a little more experience and a little more time playing together. But this past weekend was the Michigan hockey team's season in a nutshell. Some great, and then some not very good. Thoughts? I personally welcome it because I think there's a good chance he could poach some people from Ohio State staff, and it would be great if that program start having some bad luck. I think they've been fortunate, but it's also shown that their program functions at a high level, that they've been able to replace people that leave, whether it's people leaving for different positions, like Hafley getting a new job, or Meyer leaving and Brian Day being ready to step right up and do something. So they've shown they're good at filling in these spots, but the more spots they have to fill, the better chance they have of bringing in a dud. And it's been a really long decade and a half, so I'm ready to see some things not go exactly how they've been planning. And the last question, I'm going to call a night after this, is how soon do we get clarity on assistant coaches? I think pretty soon. The problem being Macdonald is Baltimore season's over. They won their playoff game tonight or today, so you're waiting a week for him, and until he is installed as a defensive coordinator, I think some of those other defensive positions like Zordich and Nua might be up in the air because technically that's going to be a defensive coordinator's call, or at least he'll have a lot of say in that. So that's not to say that Macdonald and Harbaugh can't have those conversations ahead of time and maybe make some of those moves, but I would be surprised if the defensive coordinator is the last position that is named. So kind of at the mercy of Baltimore losing. So I actually haven't been following who they'd play next, but let's all cheer for Baltimore to lose. So we can get a full staff in Schembechler for the first time in a while, given that Michigan played one assistant down all last. We can get a full staff in Schembechler for the first time in a while, given that Michigan played one assistant down all last fall. So, yeah, kind of a wait and see moment. But yeah, like I said, we're going to call that a night. Thanks for joining me. This is fun. Hadn't done it in a while, and hopefully we can get back to doing it a little more regularly. Again, if you're on here, you're not subscribed to the channel. If you subscribe to the channel, it's a big help. And if you can give a like to the video, it's helpful as well. A couple more newsletters coming out this coming week. I'll do another mailbag. If you have any questions, I'll post something on Twitter to where you can do that. But outside of that, another big week of Michigan basketball ahead, and let's hope things keep rolling. But thanks for spending part of your Sunday night with me, and we will talk to you later.